We hope you enjoy this podcast. All our conversations are inspired by films we have selected to appear on SDG Vision. So go and take a look and be inspired by people and organisations who are making valuable contributions to the Sustainable Development Goals and making our world a better place for everybody to live. Now, sit back, enjoy, be inspired, and afterwards, go and take action. Well, welcome once again to the SDG Vision podcast. I'm Pierre Jones, and today we're really delighted to have Diana Sterck, who is CEO of Sustainable Merton, with us. Hello, Diana.
Hello, Pierre. Thank you for having me.
That's a pleasure. Fantastic. We're really excited to have Sustainable Merton on, and viewers will find out why as we go along in our conversation. First things first, I suppose, we got to know about Sustainable Merton through your film, which is on YouTube, which is called Sustainable Merton, Meet the Local Charity Driving Community Climate Action in Merton. Not the slappiest of titles, but it's a great film. It's a really good film, and it says what it does. Or does what it says, rather. So that was terrific to have it on the channel, because I think, the organisation hits a lot of the Sustainable Development Goals in terms of the work that you do, and we'd love to find out more. I know there's a lot more to discover that wasn't in the film. So perhaps, Diana, we can start off with just when was Sustainable Merton started and how was it set up?
Yes, well, it was founded actually back in 2007.
Wow.
One could argue maybe a little bit ahead of its time, but founded by a very passionate local Merton resident called Tom Walsh, who is still around, but obviously not running the charity now. But he sort of wanted to start this initiative and got some like-minded people to join him, and that was the initiation of the charity as it is now.
And do you know why? Was it called Sustainable Merton in the beginning, or was it sort of renamed?
Yeah. It's always been called Sustainable Merton, and it's interesting, isn't it? Because it's probably a pretty standard name, but it does what it says, really. We are all about sustainability, and we are based in the London Borough of Merton. So there you go, really. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think that for those who are not in the UK, even perhaps for those who are in the UK, Merton is a London borough, isn't it? It's on in the southwest of London, and known, I guess, probably one of the most famous places in London that people across the world will know, which is Wimbledon, is in Merton.
That's correct. And it's an interesting one because there's 33 London boroughs which were initiated back in the 60s. And I think there was a big argument that a lot of the London boroughs are named after their key town, which in Merton's case would be Wimbledon. Yeah. But Merton wasn't, and still today people don't know where Merton is, really. So you're absolutely right, Pierre. It's South London Borough, and Wimbledon Championships and the All England Club is obviously the pinnacle of the crown, but actually it has some other wonderful attributes here as well. A beautiful green borough, actually, as well.
Yeah, and we mustn't forget the Wombles, who were TV characters, furry creatures who used to, quite aptly, who used to roam around Wimbledon Common collecting refuse, recycling, which was way ahead of its time back in the 70s.
They were the original eco-warriors.
They were.
They've made a comeback, actually, more recently. Yeah, and obviously such a perfect fit for us as an environmental charity based in the borough.
Let's hope they can be your mascots almost. It would be wonderful if you have a partnership with them. We'll come on to partnerships in a bit. As you said, you said it's a commonplace name. Actually, it's not that commonplace to have sustainable in front of something. And that's why it sort of leapt out at us. And I think it does what it says. Your focus, I think, on your website says it's climate action is at the sort of the centerpiece, really, around which everything else revolves. Could you perhaps tell us why it is this way, and how it in climate action informs the work that you do.
Yes. Well, I think, first of all, I think sustainability is a word that's become more and more relevant in recent years, because actually, for us all to lead sustainable lives, we need to sort out climate change. As we talk, Pierre, you'll see that I will refer to initiatives that we do that are really affected a lot by climate change. So we're also only a small borough-based organisation. So we don't really have the capacity to be a lobbying organisation. So we would join forces and support organisations like Greenpeace and Friends of the Earth to do that piece of work. So as a borough-based organisation, we wanted to get people involved, and that's why we have climate action as our absolute core principle. We run lots of projects that help people really raise awareness about climate change, climate crisis, we can call it at the moment, can't we? Raise awareness, educate, really. There's still a long way to go in terms of people's understanding of what all this means, and then influencing their behaviours to really change their behaviours, to get involved and be part of a movement that is addressing climate crisis. And we believe, because so many people sort of feel that they can't do much about it, that if you get on and do something that makes you feel better and you are doing your bit for the planet, then that's a good thing.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that the work that you do is wide-ranging, although it's got that central focus of climate change. And perhaps we can have a look at some of the initiatives that you're engaged with. I know air quality is one of them. Can you perhaps tell us a little bit about how you're working with that issue?
Well, again, as a borough-based organisation, obviously a key player in the borough is the London Borough of Merton, the local council. And all local councils in England will have a climate action plan, and they will set out there where the borough is against certain targets and what actions need to be taken to meet net zero. So in terms of air quality, we ran a citizen science project, which is basically involving local residents working with the council to really measure the quality of our air. And unfortunately, in London, most boroughs do not meet the World Health Organization's targets for air quality. So we had an initiative really where we're supporting the borough in doing a wider measurement of the toxic fumes in terms of the small particulates and also the nitrous oxide that's out there in the air. And nitrous dioxide, I should say.
Yeah. And how are you? Could you give us examples practically as to how you're supporting the borough with that?
So this is where residents have helped put the monitors in place, and then they have that responsibility for going and reviewing the measurements and reporting back on that. So it's nothing too complicated, but it means there's a wider measurement of the air quality that's in different localities, which is really important because, some of the busiest roads are where obviously the air quality is poor. And a lot of, in a London borough, there's a lot of schools, for example, around busy roads. So it's really important that this is measured and action taken to improve the air quality.
Absolutely. Well, we had a really fantastic interview with an organisation called Walk Ride GM. GM stands for Greater Manchester, and they were doing a lot of work around pedestrianising during school hours. Yes. Not having cars coming into roads that service schools. So there's a lot of initiatives that can perhaps be learnt and borrowed from other organisations.
And actually, Merton is a leader in school streets. That's what the initiative is called, yes. And they've done a lot of work to actually stop through traffic around schools at school entry and leaving time. Yeah.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's great to see that link. That's fantastic. And saving energy is another of the activities that you're engaged with. How do you work on that issue at all?
Well, it's really about influencing and educating. Obviously, energy became a big thing, didn't it, during the cost of living crisis? It's still there now, cost of energy. So what we try and do really is just support people in understanding how they can save energy. And also we've had volunteers make certain things like draft excluders that people can use to actually keep themselves warm. But on that one, we did a lovely project in the summer where we were at actually a National Trust event. So there's one collaboration, the National Trust in Morden Hall Park, which is a beautiful place. But they had a sort of event open day there. And we ran a stall where we had young people, and they were incredibly young, some of them, probably ranging from 3 to up to 18, where we asked them to draw on a piece of fabric what they would do in terms of saving energy. And then we mounted all these different stories on a quilt, and they were exhibited then in the National Trust in Morden Hall Park for the next couple of months. And it was just lovely to see because, even small children, it's amazing what parents tell people to do. Obviously, turn your thermostat down. So we had drawings of thermostats. We had, putting an extra jumper on, all things like that, really. It was a really lovely project. So that's a great example of where we're engaging with our local community to educate them, but in a very sort of subtle and fun way, I would say.
Yeah, and I think it's lovely to have young people, children, sort of being engaged with this, because I think often what can happen is the young children then start to talk about it with their parents and educate their parents about the issues.
It's so true.
Yeah,
so
which
true.
is powerful.
Yeah.
And I think that's a wonderful reminder then to parents that actually we've got to look after this planet, because, our children are going to not inherit it necessarily, but they're going to live into the future, longer into the future, and bear the consequences of things that we don't do. So that's lovely to hear. I know that you do a lot of work around food response and food. Perhaps you could, I think there's something called the fridge or Merton fridge or something. Yeah.
So throughout the country, there's a network of what are called community fridges, which are overseen by a national charity called Hubbub. And we are Merton's community fridge. And then we also have a network of our community fridge with other organisations in Pollard's Hill, which is a smaller but more, I suppose, deprived area in the borough. But we set up the community fridge at the start of the first lockdown during the COVID pandemic. And in essence, a community fridge is all about reducing food waste. There is a massive amount of food waste in this country, absolutely ridiculous. And the essence of a community fridge is one can take food that you're not going to eat and deposit it there, and then someone else can take it away. But because of the pandemic, and obviously the whole issue around the cost of living, we adapted our community fridge to actually support people who are struggling with the cost of living and living in what we call in this country food insecurity. So it's just gone from strength to strength, and we are now supporting about 250 families each month. I think in October we had over 1,000 visits. And these are all people who need support with food. Our service is very different to, say, food banks, which people are probably very familiar with that name, because our support is unconditional. You don't have to be signposted and referred and have a token to get in. You just register with us and we are open to all. So that's something that we were really, was really very important to us. And then on the food waste side, obviously, we collect food from supermarkets and other food outlets like bakeries in the borough. And that's all collected by volunteers and brought to our central location, which we have a partnership actually with Morden Baptist Church, who allow us to use their facilities to open our community fridge, which is open 3 times a week. And people come and they can shop. And the other thing that I think is really important to us is that we want this service to be one that is provided with dignity for the users. So we don't give them just a bag with food in. They actually can select from that. From basically, we lay all the food out, and it's a bit like going around a supermarket, and you can choose certain amounts, and dependent on the amount of food that we have, you're allowed to choose so many items. It's all free, and I think it's really a lifeline for people. And we're just initiating at the moment a campaign really to support that in the run-up, obviously, to Christmas, where we want people obviously to be able to get food, don't we? So the campaign, I think we'll have it linked to this podcast, so that would be really good.
Yeah, no, that would be lovely. The 250 families or people that are benefiting, are you able to meet all of the demand out there, or is it just not possible at the moment, or is demand outstrip supply?
Yeah. Well, the demand, there are other organisations in the borough that provide food support in different ways. So I think collectively, hopefully we are meeting demand, but there's no sign of it diminishing. I think that's the important thing. And our initiative is totally dependent on grant funding. And like many charities, our grant funding is very short term. So that particular service has no security post-March 2025. So that's why we have to raise money to support it as well. But yes, so, lots of people of all different ages, a very diverse community visiting. And I think so many of them come as well because they love the social connections that they get when they're there. And the service is pretty much run by volunteers. We have around 45 active, we call them fridge friends. They're active volunteers that are there either collecting the food or distributing it, setting it up and distributing it to the people that come along. But a lot of those volunteers are people that have actually benefited from the service themselves. And we have one lady that we interview in the video that I think you have, Pierre. She says she can't afford to give us money, but what she can afford to do is give us her time. And I think that's just perfect, isn't it? So,
Absolutely.
I think that's, if you get into these real grassroots community-led initiatives, they really are very inspiring to see how people behave and support each other.
And it's interesting to see the layers of benefits. It's not just the most obvious purpose of the task at hand, which is food. But as you say, it's, some people, we were talking to a fantastic community kitchen in Nottingham called Salam Shalom the other week. It's a Jewish and Muslim run charity. And this came up as well, that it's about dignity, but it's also about people meeting other people. Some people may experience isolation. So, that benefit, and also giving is so important for people's mental well-being as well. Another film we had was a film set in Sweden, and a woman living in a forest. And she said, well, one comment, which I thought really hit home with me. She said, there's not enough kindness in the world. She said, and it's a shame because it's not just the people who are receiving the kindness, it's the people who are giving also get huge benefit from giving, mental benefit from giving.
Absolutely. And I think with many, many of the projects that we do, we integrate well-being.
Yeah.
And all those things that you've described, they're absolutely intrinsic to the work that we do.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can begin to understand why we were so excited by your organization, because one of the key things about the Sustainable Development Goals recognizes there are challenges, but recognizes that the challenges are interlinked and also the solutions are interlinked as well. So it's getting away from sort of looking at things in isolation to one another. It's just not the way the world works.
And, food is a great example of that, isn't it? If you take the food miles, the food journey, where does the food come to? The whole need to do restorative farming, and then what we're also trying to do locally is grow food, which is again grown in what we call our growing spaces, which are plots of land that we are enabled to use to grow vegetables and food and fruit and all that. And then bring that food into the community fridge network. So that's, again, empowering people to do what they love to do, because some people love to grow and, work on the land, if you like, but actually they are supporting others through that kindness of providing food into that food network.
Absolutely. And the mental health benefit of growing as well. I know myself, I've got an allotment, and my goodness, it really helps my well-being, my mental well-being. Are these allotments that people are growing food on, or do you have land yourself? No,
so we have, we work on 3 plots of land that are provided to us by Merton Council. Some of that has been derelict land that we've helped convert. So one of them is called Mitcham Community Orchard and Garden. And I call it an urban oasis. It's absolutely in the middle of a very, very built up area. And in that plot of land, we have about, 25, 30 fruit trees, a lot. We have raised beds for growing vegetables. We have flowers and other bushes. We have herbs. You name it, really, in terms of growing, we have it there. And it's a completely community facility. It's managed by, I have a manager that oversees all our growing spaces, but it's really run the volunteer. If it wasn't for the volunteers, we wouldn't be able to do any of this stuff. And they love it. And I've seen social networks at that particular garden develop, where we had quite a few older people who were probably socially isolated coming, and they've now got friendship circles. It's just lovely to see.
Yeah. Again, those added benefits are fantastic. And the last sort of area that I was going to ask you to talk about was creating a circular economy. But in a way, you've already described that. But perhaps you can sort of show how you would explain how it knits together.
Yes, I suppose that is a circular economy.
Yeah.
The other side is all about waste, really.
Yes.
Waste minimization, waste repurposing, and really the circular economy that we've been focusing on is very much about the latter in terms of the specific initiative that we've been doing. We've actually, in its first year, we've saved about 700 kilos of fabric going into the waste stream. The amount of materials that are wasted is absolutely shouldn't be allowed. So obviously, we encourage people to go shopping in their own wardrobe is one statement that we would say, because, this whole thing about going and buying new clothes is just, it goes on, and half of these clothes that we then donate, charities can't cope with them. They end up in landfill in some other country. It's just terrible.
Yeah.
The circular economy is where we would like to get to, and we're in our sort of second year of that, is really connecting businesses to, if you like, offset what may be waste or rubbish to one business to another business to make something useful out of it. And that can happen. So, for example, pallets are a great example of that. Pallets, they don't get returned. They're just left with the business. So actually, if they can donate those pallets to a useful enterprise that will convert them into all sorts. I mean, you get in a lot of community gardens, you will get pallets piled up on top of each other, and they can make nests and things for insects. So there's lots of alternative uses for things. So that's the sort of repurposing. And the main aim here is, again, not to be throwing stuff away. And this happens all over the world, doesn't it? And we kind of don't want that. So obviously, plastic is a huge area of concern for everyone. So we really try and influence people not to buy plastic bottles. Just use a refillable bottle. It's not really very difficult. And to also reduce the amount of food that they buy that is in plastic. So this is a great example, isn't it, where, really government has got to do stuff about this to stop the amount of plastic that is used by supermarkets and other producers. Supermarkets will say, it keeps food fresher for longer. But actually, we just need to get rid of it, because it is the worst thing. If you went to the local recycling waste processing centre, as they call them these days, the plastic waste is the one thing that stops the efficiency of that centre. It gets caught up in the whole conveyor belts. They have to remove it by hand. It serves no purpose. It's going nowhere apart to either into the local landfill or to the local incinerator, which we have in Merton, and then it's burnt. And obviously, what does it create? Toxic fumes. So, that's the negative side of a circular economy, because that's going nowhere.
It's going nowhere. Absolutely. It breaks that circuit, doesn't it?
Yeah.
You said earlier on that, we can't really put pressure on government, but I think you do. And I think it perhaps in ways that are not necessarily visible, but the more you interact with people at the local level about these issues and engage them, the more people will then start to think, well, what's my local MP doing about that? What about the next election? What is the party that is speaking in the language that I want to hear? That's why I think that sort of community action and bringing people together is so important, because it creates a conversation and a dialogue, and out of that comes change behaviour. But also, I think potentially, and I think often it does happen, that it does create a political momentum or political change. It can do. Have you seen that at all?
Well, I think you're spot on.
Right.
I think sometimes it's just a change in policy that we need to affect change.
Yeah.
In London, the ultra low emission zone was a great example of that. I mean, people really hated it, because obviously it meant that some people couldn't use their cars without paying extraordinary amounts of money to drive into London. But actually, it will improve air quality. Yeah. And that's what we need to do.
No, absolutely. And again, I think that often in London and big cities, those that suffer most from bad air quality are the poorest, who live next to these huge, great big roads and, pretty much 24-hour traffic, etc. So it's a social justice issue as much as it is an environmental issue. And again, we're talking about these interlinking issues, which are fascinating. I mean, you've talked a lot about partnerships already. I mean, you've mentioned local businesses, you mentioned the local council, Merton Council, you've mentioned the National Trust. Any other partnerships that you're engaged with that you think are worth us listening to and learning from?
Well, I think, if you are a small charity, the way to achieve what you want to achieve is through collaboration. So the more people that are working together, then you're going to get a better impact, aren't you, really? So that is I really am someone that believes in collaboration. So one of the things that we've done work with the social housing landlords, actually.
Right.
That's an interesting one, but most of those, have got climate action plans that they want to achieve. So they're very pro working with us. So we have one where we're working on a waste minimisation project on a local estate, which we're now looking at doing things like repair cafes, where people bring along items, small electrical items that have stopped working that could be repaired. So that's an example of waste minimisation. The area that we want to do more work with, we are doing some work, but is with businesses, because actually these days, particularly large businesses, have to report, don't they, on their ESG activity. And they also need to get community links. So we're kind of a perfect solution for them, because, we will take corporate volunteers that will come and work with us on some of our activity. So again, it's kind of very rewarding for those members of staff as well, because they're doing teamwork, but they're actually supporting a local charitable initiative. So businesses are an important part of what we do as well.
And have you seen, talking about your regular volunteers and also, interestingly, those business volunteers, have you seen, in the process of them engaging with the work that you do, have you seen attitudes change and behaviour change? And maybe over a short period of time with a corporate volunteer, it might not be noticeable, but in general, what would you say?
Yeah, no, it's all about feeling good, isn't it? I think that's really what it boils down to. So we've just done an initiative with a well-known brand. It's got a global presence. And they've just done fundraising for us, really. They've done sort of climate-related activity to do that fundraising. We have some that take it in turns to come and volunteer at the community fridge. So, they're seeing really straight away what's going on. They collect food for us, and then they'll come and help distribute it. We have those that have come and worked in our growing spaces. We have another business that's built a whole educational shelter for us in our Mitcham Community Orchard and Gardens. So there's many different ways that businesses will get involved and want to get involved. And I think there's just so much that can be achieved together that's a win-win for everyone, because at the end of the day, it is dealing with climate action and addressing some of the major issues that we have. But it's also, as you said, that social cohesion, connection with your community, and actually just feeling good about doing something good during the day.
I like this, you coming back to it feels good and people feel good, because I think that often the climate debate or discussion is, the problem's too big, it's out of our control. And also, it's a chore, it's a pain.
It's very negative.
It's all very negative.
That's the thing, it drags you down.
Yeah.
And particularly, if some people have really been affected by the climate crisis, then it really is a negative force. So if they can sort of do something that makes them feel better, that is also addressing it, then I think that can only be a good thing, can't it?
And I think often it's about connection as well, as we've been talking about, that in the world that we live in, sometimes people's lives can be quite fractured. That they know the world of work, they may know, particularly in London, they may know their next door neighbour, they may not, but the initiatives that you run, they're multi-layered, the benefits, and one of them is feeling good. And that feeling good then overspills into the conversations they may have with their friends or whatever, that, I've just been down to the community orchard and I've been helping out and it's fantastic. So it's this snowball effect, hopefully, that I'm sure happens in Merton.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think you're going to ask me about civic pride.
Yeah.
But that kind of leads us on to that, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
So, you know, we're actually very aligned with the local council, who have civic pride as one of their priorities. But if you can get involved, if you can get people involved in initiatives that actually deal with civic pride, that certainly is a feel-good factor. So we have one initiative which is called Merton Garden Streets, which is about people on streets getting together and planting pollinating plants, really, on verges, around tree pits and the like. And so it creates social networks on a street. It brings people together to do planting, and obviously it is providing more pollinating plants within the borough, which is obviously good for our biodiversity. So, yeah, that's a great example, I think, of civic pride, because it's beautifying the borough, actually, in a very appropriate way. So, yeah, that's one example. And I think if you are any planting that people do, actually, if it looks good, and largely it's going to, isn't it? We do have a feeling of pride, even if we do our own gardens, don't we?
Absolutely.
So, yeah, and getting involved. I recently, this is not part of the charity Sustainable Merton, but I've recently, in my local town centre, participated in painting a mural. And that gave me a great sense of pride, and actually a stake in my local town centre, because I can walk down the alleyway that this enormous mural is on and say, I did that little bit there. And I think that's really important, isn't it? And I think a lot of that came out of COVID. So this whole sort of thing about localism and spending more time in our local communities, I think with hybrid working, people still are doing that.
That's true.
So therefore, I mean, we've just had a recent report in London where the outer London town centres are actually doing better than the inner London shopping areas, because there's more and more people working from home. So that's obviously something that's of benefit to us, but something that we must, harness and act upon as well.
It's interesting, isn't it? Yeah, it's one of the few benefits of COVID, I suppose. But I mean, particularly in cities, a city like London, where I guess not so much Merton, because it's not an inner London borough, but the population can be quite fluid, and I guess at times people may refer them to themselves as Londoners rather than a Merton person or whatever. Yeah. So it's nice to be knitting a sense of community in a big city.
Yes. And I think, in a place like London, and I'm sure that's the case in many cities across the world, there are local cities within the city.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, of course, our focus is the Sustainable Development Goals, and we've talked about. I think Sustainable Merton hits about 7 or 8 Sustainable Development Goals, probably more if we went into it. I'm sure we'd uncover some more, and you may not hit all of the 17, but you'd be pretty close, probably. Were you, as an organisation, aware of the Sustainable Development Goals? And if so, have they had any influence or impact at all?
It's interesting that you've said that, because when we were renewing our strategy earlier this year, we looked at the Sustainable Development Goals, and we actually have adapted our 4 pillars of work to embrace them. So there were some areas that we aren't doing as much as we think we should be. So let's take biodiversity, for example. There's I think a big move towards rewilding and creating biodiverse areas. So that's something that we would love to do, which is quite achievable in a locality. Again, working with the local authority, I think, on areas of land that they own, or where other people own tracts of land, because, there's land all over the place and no one sometimes knows who owns it. But so there's that. So we introduced that and protecting our natural resources, really, as that we adapted our strategy to fit that in. And then I think really the environmental risks, which obviously flooding is one that's obviously a huge one, which we haven't done too much on at all, but we're very aware that we should be looking to do that. So, so the whole thing around water, really. In this borough, we have something, a small river called the River Wandle that does flood. So we do have to look at that. And obviously, we have struggled with rain. And those that follow football in your listeners may be aware of AFC Wimbledon, who have their football stadium in Plough Lane, and that had a huge sinkhole there as a result of the rain that we had a couple of months back. So, the borough is affected by that.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's another story in itself, AFC Wimbledon and Milton Keynes and the transfer of the club to Milton Keynes, etc. But another nice little story about localism and a bit of a triumph bringing the club back to Plough Lane, but terrible to hear there was a sinkhole there. Awful.
Well, they've overcome it, but yeah.
Good.
That my understanding is that stadium was built really on a floodplain, which that's the challenge we have in this country. So many buildings are built on a floodplain. So obviously the whole environmental risk assessment was part of the planning set up, but that's what can happen, I guess. Yeah.
Just coming back a little bit to the organisation, you say you're a small charity. How many members of staff do you have, or do you have paid members of staff?
I do. I mean, I have 8. I think only 3 of them are full-time.
Right.
So even myself, I'm part-time. So 8 sounds a lot, but in terms of full-time, we're probably running 4 to 5, I suppose, full-time equivalent. What we do have is 400 volunteers.
Wow.
Yeah.
Goodness.
And without them, we could not achieve what we do. I did an event, for example, at the weekend where the volunteers just on the day contributed 70 hours of time collectively. And in our last reporting year, our volunteers contributed 18,000 hours of volunteering time. So that's how we can achieve what we do. We couldn't do it without our volunteers. And they come from all walks of life and do all sorts of things. And that just suits us fine. But we always need more volunteers.
So anyone listening within the Merton catchment area, get in touch.
And, some of it is not, you don't have to be active. You can actually give us your brain and your skills. So, if you look actually at our community fridge branding, that was done by a local volunteer who was obviously wanting to extend their branding skills. So, branding, websites, IT, all of that is all help that we need, because as a small charity, we don't have that capacity within the organisation.
We'll put a link down in the section below this podcast conversation. But just let us know now, what is the email address, or what's the best way that people can contact you if they would like to volunteer?
Well, they can email me directly. That's not a problem. All our email addresses end with the same ending, but I'm Diana, Diana, at Sustainable Merton, or one word, .org. And that's what we are.
Well, it's so lovely to hear somebody in senior management say, well, they can email me directly, because it's so rare.
No, that's fine.
I like that openness. I think that's absolutely fantastic. We think the work you do is really, really important. And the team at SDG Vision, Gary and I in particular, have been talking about, it's strange. We talked about, we need across the country a network of local organisations that are doing work that is aligned with the Sustainable Development Goals. We look at your organisation and we think you're doing exactly that. So, I mean, you may not explicitly say we are, But you do, and as you say, you have referred to the SDGs. So we think there should be a sustainable Edinburgh. We think there should be a sustainable Luton. We think there should be a sustainable Cardiff. How would you advise people in terms of setting up? Because obviously you're an organisation that's been going, I think you said 2007. So you're quite a mature organisation. What would your key advice be to people who were thinking of setting up something similar? Because of course, all places will have their own issues, so they're not going to be exactly the same as Merton. But
there are similar organisations to us, but I don't know any that sort of got the name Sustainable.
No,
actually, they've got eco in it or transition or things like that. Sure, it's easy, actually. I mean, there's a lot of people that set up small initiatives, and that's great. You can run that with a network of like-minded people giving their time for free, and you can achieve what you achieve. In order to set up we're a charity, first of all, that extends its reach and operates, I guess, in a business-like way with all the correct structures that the Charity Commission require you to have, does take time and skill and expertise. So I wouldn't go at it lightheartedly, would be my advice, because it is hard work. I've run a business before. Actually, running a charity, I feel, is harder work than running a business, because there are so many requirements when you run a charity. You know, I've said about our 400 volunteers and what they contribute, but we have to have a lot of policies in place, particularly safeguarding. Wherever you use volunteers, you've got to have all that in place, because obviously it's all about making sure that people can do what they want to do in a safe environment. So, I think that's the way to do it. But I would say in localities, if like-minded organisations can join forces, then they can get more results by doing that. And that's one of the things that we traditionally have done. And it's actually quite difficult to do. But for example, we look after the money for an allotment group because they haven't got the infrastructure in place to do that. Yeah. So, it's things like that, really, that I think I would just say, find out what else is going on in your borough before initiating something new, and see if you can harness that energy and passion and expertise and work collaboratively.
And it could be you could play a linking role in terms of linking those different initiatives together, and it would be more of a network than necessarily one organisation.
But, in a straight answer, wouldn't it be wonderful if the government said, this is what we want, and they funded us all? That would just be...
Well, but that's how change happens, though, isn't it, Diana? The more organisations there are out there, like yourselves, with local people involved. Again, we're talking about, going back to what we were talking about, influence that people can have if there's enough of you upon politicians, etc. You're absolutely right. I mean, the work that you're doing is essential, but there should be bigger pots of money available.
Well, I think, and the other thing is it's short term. So we get all our money largely either through grants or by our own fundraising.
Yeah.
And when one bids for grants, you're very lucky to get a grant that goes over a 12-month period. So, we live on this short term.
Yeah.
And it really doesn't help the efficiency and effectiveness of any charity to have to work like that. So I know that there is a lot of lobbying going on to say that actually charities need to be funded for longer.
Yeah.
And then there was another move, some years back, where the grant funders only funded project managers, project officers. They don't fund the core costs of running the charity, which again, none of those projects could happen if you haven't got that infrastructure in place that I've mentioned. So, it's a tricky one.
It is a tricky one. But as you say, I think perhaps start small, see if you can play a role in linking organisations together and grow it gradually, because it can be quite daunting if you go headfirst into it.
Yeah, I think so. And, if you set up a charity, then you've got to have a board of trustees who are responsible for the governance. So, I have a lovely board of trustees, and we couldn't run it, without them either. So it's all of those sort of nuances that are really, really important.
How long have you been with the organisation, Diana?
So 7 years.
Have you? Yeah.
Yeah, so quite some time, I suppose. Yeah.
And you come from the world of business, I gather.
I do.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that for me is, I know some people that run charities will hate what I'm about to say, but you have to run a charity in a business-like manner these days.
Sure.
So I think that is a skill that I have brought to the charity in terms of formalising some of its internal structures to make sure that it's run in a business-like and efficient way. Because again, if you're privileged to have grant funding, the grant funders require you really to have a really good structure in place in terms of your financial management, your risk assessments, your volunteer safeguarding and all of that. Quite right as well. But, so you've got to have those skills within an organisation to be able to do all of that.
I mean, it's interesting. Something you've brought to your organisation. Is there something that, as a business person and now working with a charity, something that you've benefited from, or that added to your skill set or your awareness that you perhaps didn't have so strongly when you were working?
Oh, well, managing volunteers, without doubt.
Yeah.
Having 400 unpaid volunteers. It's an army, isn't it, to a small organisation of 8 people. So, certainly that. And I think it's just the grassroots connectivity into the community, and meeting people from all walks of life, which in most businesses you probably wouldn't get to do. They're things that I think have added to my I suppose my skill set in a way, but are really nice things to add to a skill set.
Oh, absolutely. It's not accounts or something dry and boring.
No, it's not anything, like compliance, I would say. Yeah.
Well, that's lovely. Is there anything that you want to mention, Diana, that we haven't covered, or events coming up, or anything in particular, message you want to give, or?
Well, I think, I think we've touched on this, Pierre, but, we are a small charity. We are only as good as the money that we get in. We are actually initiating a massive fundraising strategy to try and give us more control of what we do and when we do it. So we do have a campaign out at the moment, which is all about community fridge and helping service those 250 families a month that I spoke about. So we have got that. And then we have growing events. If anyone's local that wants to come along, we have open days and action days in our growing places. And we've usually got a full itinerary of events, and obviously just getting involved in volunteering with us.
Great. And people can find out about events, etc., on your website is the best place, or social media, Facebook?
Yeah, so if they just go to sustainablemerton.org, we've got our events on there.
Smashing. Diana, thank you so much. You're an inspiration to all of us. And as I said, we hope that that small army of volunteers that you've got in Merton will increase and expand across to other boroughs and other parts of the country and the world, because I think that these initiatives are so important because they really do face and the challenges, the multiple challenges that threaten the planet and the people that live on it. So again, Diana, thank you so much. And keep us informed, keep in touch, let us know. Well, in a year's time, it would be lovely to have a chat again to see what other exciting initiatives you're engaged with.
Lovely.
Smashing. Thank you. Bye-bye now.
Bye-bye.
Taking time and action at a local level can have a big impact when we all come together. Residents, businesses, and communities all have an important role to play in reducing carbon emissions and creating a more sustainable future. Through people-led projects and partnership working, Sustainable Merton is helping communities, improving the health and well-being of others, increasing civic pride, and contributing to a global movement to protect our planet.
Together, we can improve the quality of the air we breathe, save energy, stop good food from going to waste, green our streets, create thriving growing spaces, and build a circular economy in Merton. We also work with many businesses and organisations in the borough who share our passion of sustainability and care about the community.
The quality of the air we breathe needs improving. We actively encourage positive behaviour change to reduce air pollution, such as stopping idling and promoting active travel. We also coordinate Merton's Air Quality Citizen Science project with Merton Council.
We are living in an energy crisis, but we shouldn't have to choose between eating or heating our homes. We promote energy-saving behaviours and raise awareness for low-carbon energy solutions.
We provide useful tools for residents, such as our easy-to-digest energy-saving handbook, and support Friends of the Earth's United for Warmer Homes campaign.
More and more people are struggling to afford the food that they need. So we've made redistributing good food to the local community a key priority.
We're a leading light in the borough, collecting food that would otherwise go to waste from local supermarkets and shops and sharing this with the community.
Volunteers and visitors have helped prevent 114,000 kilograms of CO2 emission. We are now using a zero-emissions e-bike for collection and distribution.
Our Growing Spaces activities provide opportunities for residents to see climate-friendly food growing and gardening in action, to develop new skills such as orcharding and gardening DIY, to brighten up their streets and learn more about planting for pollinators, not to mention the many health and well-being benefits they bring.
Waste is a big problem. That's why we've created The Wheel, Merton's waste reduction and circular economy hub, which helps residents reduce, reuse and repair. We've opened a new repair cafe and pre-love studio where people can learn how to give clothes and household items a new lease of life.
The Pre-Love Studio has prevented more than 20 kilograms of textile waste and over 73 kilograms of CO2 emissions. That's the equivalent of driving a petrol car from Mitcham all the way to Hadrian's Wall.
We also champion the refill revolution, community litter picking, and encourage positive behaviour change around recycling habits.
The contribution of our dedicated volunteers is the key to our success.
Fridge friends, repairers, growers and gardeners, Merton Street coordinators, and those who actively participate in our projects activities and resident-led green groups all make a huge difference in improving sustainability in the borough.
Together, we can do bigger and better things, and we would love for you to join us in our mission to make Merton a happier, healthier, and more sustainable community, with local people working together for a future that protects the natural world and each other.